I'll create a compelling revenge story following all your guidelines. I'll maintain past tense throughout, avoid any forbidden words, places, and structure it according to the 3-part format with proper word counts per segment. Division head outsourced my entire department after 22 years of service. He forgot I own the patents to their main products. Part 1. The status quo and foreshadowing segment. 1. 450 words. Michelle, after 22 years, we're outsourcing your entire function, Travis announced, his voice lacking even the slightest hint of emotion. Your last day is Friday. I sat across from him in his glass-walled office, the Denver skyline stretching behind him like a postcard backdrop for my professional execution. Travis Ellington had been division head for exactly 8 months, and in that time, he'd managed to dismantle much of what I'd spent over 2 decades building. Swallowing the knot in my throat, I nodded politely. Thank you for the years of experience. His shoulders visibly relaxed. He'd clearly expected tears, perhaps begging. Instead, I stood up calmly, smoothed my skirt, and extended my hand for a final shake. His relief was palpable as our brief handshake concluded what he thought was the end of my story at Solvix Engineering. My name is Michelle Tran, and at 55, I never imagined I'd be starting over. When I joined Solvix as a young engineer in 2001, we were just a scrappy startup with ambitious dreams of revolutionizing industrial automation systems. I had worked countless weekends, missed vacations, and sacrificed family time to help transform those dreams into reality. Now, our hydraulic control systems were industry standards, used in everything from manufacturing plants to aerospace applications. Walking back to my department, 6 people, all receiving the same news that morning, I maintained my composure. Jessica, my most talented protégé, was red-eyed at her desk. "How can they do this?" she whispered as I passed. "The whole HVAC system was your creation." I simply squeezed her shoulder. What I couldn't tell her, what nobody except my attorney knew, was that back when Solvix was struggling financially, we had made an unusual arrangement. Instead of the higher salary I deserved, I accepted significantly lower compensation in exchange for retaining patent rights to certain core technologies I developed. The company received exclusive licensing at favorable rates as long as I remained employed. The agreement, signed by the original founder, had been filed away and forgotten by everyone except me. Travis couldn't possibly know that the patents for the technology architecture in our HVX 300 series, the product that generated 40% of company revenue, were registered under my name. The overseas team he'd hired in Bangalore would hit an invisible wall once I was gone. As I began quietly cleaning out my desk that afternoon, an email arrived from Human Resources with exit paperwork. The severance was insulting. 16 weeks for 22 years. But what they'd soon discover would be worth so much more. 22 years earlier, I had walked into Solvix Engineering for the first time, carrying nothing but a messenger bag and boundless determination. The original offices were nothing like the gleaming glass tower we now occupied, just 2 floors of a converted warehouse with questionable heating and a persistent smell of motor oil. "Welcome aboard," Harold Jenkins, the founder, had said, pumping my hand vigorously. "We can't offer much in salary yet, but we're going to change the way industrial systems function. You'll have ownership in whatever you create here." Harold had meant it both figuratively and literally. When I developed the first prototype of what would become our hydraulic variable axis control system, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Instead of letting my innovation become the property of whatever corporation might acquire our assets, Harold had drawn up the unusual patent arrangement. Solvix would have exclusive licensing rights as long as I remained part of the team, but the intellectual property would stay with its creator. "This protects both of us," he'd explained. "The company gets the technology at favorable rates, and you get security no matter what happens." Over the years, as Solvix grew from struggling startup to industry leader, the arrangement faded into background knowledge. Harold retired 8 years ago, and each successive leadership team seemed less aware of those early agreements. The current management, including Travis, had clearly never reviewed the original IP documentation. For 22 years, I'd been the quiet force behind our innovation department. I never sought the spotlight, only the satisfaction of solving complex engineering challenges and mentoring talented young minds like Jessica. My team had been small but mighty, responsible for 5 major product lines that collectively represented over 60% of company revenue. Travis, with his MBA from Wharton and spreadsheet-focused worldview, saw only a department of 6 people with high Western salaries that could be replaced by 15 engineers in India at 1/3 the cost. What his efficiency models failed to capture was the institutional knowledge, the creative problem-solving, and most importantly, the ownership of key intellectual property. The days following Travis's announcement passed in a blur of paperwork and awkward goodbyes. I met with each team member individually, providing reference letters and industry contacts to help with their transitions. Jessica cried during our farewell lunch. "What will you do now?" she asked, pushing her food around her plate. I offered a mysterious smile. "I'm not done yet," I said. "Sometimes being underestimated is actually an advantage." She looked confused, but I kept my plans to myself. Friday would arrive soon enough, and then the real work would begin. On my final day, I arrived earlier than usual, 6 a.m., before anyone except security was in the building. I had arranged special permission to access all areas, claiming a need to collect personal items from various testing labs. In reality, I was saying goodbye to the technologies I had nurtured from conception to market domination. The HVX laboratory had been my second home for years. I ran my fingers along the prototype of our first successful model, now displayed like a museum piece. Next to it sat progressively more advanced iterations, culminating in the HVAX 300, our current flagship product. Each represented countless hours of problem-solving, collaboration, and passion. By 8 a.m., other employees began filtering in. Many stopped by my office, now half-packed into cardboard boxes, to offer awkward farewells. At 10 a.m., my team gathered for a final meeting. "I've been honored to work with every one of you," I told them, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Whatever happens next, remember that what we built here mattered." At noon, Travis's assistant delivered my official termination paperwork with practiced corporate detachment. I signed everything without comment and handed over my security badge. By 2 p.m., I was walking through the lobby for the last time, carrying 2 decades of memories in a single box. That evening, I sat in my attorney Philip's office, watching as he reviewed the documents spread across his desk. "Everything's in order," he confirmed. "The patent rights are ironclad. The licensing agreement clearly terminates with your employment." "And the new agreement I proposed?" Philip shuffled through the papers. "Consulting rates at 5 times your former salary, exclusive rights management, and veto power over any modifications to your technologies. It's aggressive, but they'll have little choice. How long until they realize the problem? That depends on how quickly they try to implement changes with the new team. The system will continue functioning as is, but any attempt to modify the code or design will trigger licensing verification. I'm guessing 2 weeks, maximum." I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions: vindication, sadness, and a strange sort of freedom. "Send the official notice on Monday, but hold the consulting proposal until they contact us." The weekend stretched before me, my first in decades without Solvix work to occupy my thoughts. I spent Saturday in my garden, replanting spring bulbs and clearing away dead leaves, a fitting metaphor for my current situation. On Sunday, I hiked through Red Rocks Park, watching rock climbers scale seemingly impossible vertical faces, finding new handholds where none appeared to exist. Monday morning arrived with unfamiliar quietness. No early alarm, no rushed breakfast, no commute. Instead, I savored my coffee while reading news on my tablet. At precisely 9 a.m., Philip would be sending the cease and desist letter to Solvix's legal department. The countdown to chaos had begun. The first call came 3 days later, much sooner than I had anticipated. "Michelle, this is Diane from legal at Solvix." The voice on the other end of the line sounded strained. "We've received some concerning correspondence from your attorney. There must be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Diane," I replied calmly. "The patents for the HVX system architecture are registered under my name, with Solvix holding exclusive licensing rights contingent upon my employment. As my employment has been terminated, so has the licensing agreement." A long pause followed. "Could we schedule a meeting to discuss this further?" "My attorney handles all communication now. I'm sure you have his contact information." Over the next week, the calls escalated up the corporate ladder. First Diane, then the head of legal, then the chief technology officer. I referred them all to Philip, who reported back with undisguised amusement. "They're in full panic mode," he said during our Thursday update. "The outsourced team can't make any modifications to the system without triggering licensing alerts. Production on the next generation HVX 400 has completely stalled." I felt a flicker of concern for my former team. "Have they contacted Jessica or any of the others?" "From what I understand, they've been trying to rehire your whole department, but most have already accepted positions elsewhere. Jessica started at Navarro Systems on Monday." I smiled at that. Navarro was one of our biggest competitors, and Jessica would thrive there. 9 days after my departure, Travis Ellington himself called. I let it go to voicemail. "Michelle, this is Travis. We need to discuss the patent situation immediately. This is creating significant operational challenges. Please call me back as soon as possible." I didn't return his call. Instead, I forwarded the message to Philip with a single instruction. Let them stew another week. That week, I took a short trip to Glenwood Springs, soaking in the natural hot springs and enjoying the mountain air. For the first time in years, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to release. Each night, I slept deeply without dreams of project deadlines or engineering problems. When I returned home, there were 4 more messages from Travis, each more desperate than the last. The final one abandoned all pretense of corporate composure. "Michelle, please. The board is breathing down my neck. We've had to halt 3 production lines. Whatever you want, we'll discuss it. Just call me back." Philip reported that Solvix's stock had dropped 12% since news of the production challenges had leaked to industry analysts. The board was scheduled to meet in emergency session on Friday. "Time to present our proposal," I told him. "Send over the consulting agreement." The terms were straightforward, but heavily in my favor. I would provide exclusive licensing for all my patents at reasonable rates, plus consulting services at 5 times my former salary. Additionally, I would have final approval on any modifications to my technologies, and I would train the new engineers, both in Denver and remotely in Bangalore. Thursday morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Travis standing on my porch, dark circles under his eyes and his typically perfect appearance noticeably disheveled. "Michelle," he said, his voice hoarse. "The board has removed me as division head. I've been demoted to regional sales. I just wanted to speak with you directly before I leave Denver." I studied his face, not with satisfaction at his downfall, but with the weary recognition that he had learned nothing from this experience. "Travis, this wasn't personal," I said finally. "It was about respecting the value of what was built over decades." He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "The new interim division head wants to meet with you. Eleanor Jenkins." I couldn't hide my surprise. "Harold's daughter?" Travis nodded. "She's been called in to handle the crisis." Eleanor Jenkins had her father's eyes, keen, intelligent, and capable of looking straight through corporate nonsense. We sat across from each other at a corner table in a small cafe downtown, away from Solvix headquarters. "I returned from London as soon as I heard," she said, stirring her tea methodically. "Dad always said you were the backbone of Solvix's innovation. I should have stayed more involved after he retired." Eleanor had chosen a different path from her father, becoming an international consultant for renewable energy projects. She had inherited his shares in Solvix, but had remained a passive board member until now. The board has asked me to resolve this situation, she continued. They've unanimously approved your consulting proposal. I raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Production has completely halted on our main product lines. The Bangalore team is skilled, but they can't work without access to the foundational architecture. Every day we delay costs millions. And Travis's outsourcing decision? Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. Being reevaluated. His approach was short-sighted. I sipped my coffee, considering. The agreement isn't just about money, Eleanor. It's about respect for innovation and the people who create it. I understand that better than most, she replied. Which is why I'm proposing an addition to your terms. She reached into her leather portfolio and slid a document across the table. I scanned it quickly, then looked up in surprise. Director of Advanced Innovation, with a seat on the executive committee? Eleanor nodded. We need to rebuild what was lost. Your patents are valuable, but your vision is irreplaceable. I want you to lead a new department focused on next-generation technologies, with complete autonomy and direct board access. The offer was unexpected and flattering, but caution tempered my response. What about the outsourced team? They'll continue handling routine maintenance and implementation under your guidance, but core innovation returns to Denver, with you at the helm and the authority to rebuild your team. I thought of Jessica and the others, now scattered across different companies. I'll need to bring in new talent and competitive compensation packages to attract them. You'll have complete budget authority. The board has approved whatever resources you need. We spoke for another hour, hashing out details. By the time we parted, I had agreed in principle to Eleanor's proposal, pending final review with Philip. That evening, as I discussed the terms with my attorney, an even more surprising twist emerged. Michelle, Philip said, reviewing the fine print. This innovation director position, it includes an ownership stake, 5% of Solvix vested immediately. I must have looked shocked, because he chuckled. Eleanor's serious about keeping you. 5% makes you one of the largest individual shareholders. After how they pushed me out. Sometimes the universe has a way of righting wrongs, Philip mused. This is a remarkable turnaround. The following Monday, I found myself back in the Solvix building, but this time I was escorted to the executive floor. Eleanor had arranged a corner office with views of both the mountains and downtown Denver. On the desk sat a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photo of Harold Jenkins and me from 2005, standing beside the first production model of the HVX system. A note in Eleanor's handwriting read, Dad always said Michelle was the heart of Solvix. Time to make that official. As I set up my new workspace, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Heard rumors you're back. Is it true? I smiled as I replied, Better than back. How do you feel about Navarro Systems versus a chance to build something revolutionary? For you? I'd give notice today, came her immediate response. The pieces were falling into place, but the most dramatic revelation was still to come. 2 weeks into my new role, I requested access to all of Solvix's financial and operational data for the past 5 years. As Director of Advanced Innovation with board-level clearance, such requests could no longer be denied. What I discovered sent shockwaves through the executive committee. Travis's outsourcing plan hadn't been developed in isolation. He had been working with external consultants from Vantage Group, a private equity firm quietly accumulating Solvix shares. Their strategy was textbook, slash operating costs, boost short-term profits, then sell the hollowed-out company at a premium before the long-term damage became apparent. The timing matches perfectly, I explained during the emergency board meeting. Travis joins 8 months ago. 3 months later, Vantage begins acquiring shares through various shell companies. 5 months in, he proposes outsourcing our core innovation team despite record profits. Eleanor leaned forward, eyes narrowed. And you believe Travis was deliberately placed here to orchestrate this? The evidence suggests it, I replied, displaying a series of email exchanges retrieved from company servers. He was in contact with Vantage executives before his arrival. Every efficiency review, every cost-cutting measure was reported directly to them. Howard Donnelly, our longest-serving board member, looked ashen. These acquisition patterns, they were building toward a controlling interest. If they'd succeeded, Solvix would have been gutted and sold for parts, I finished. Our patents would have been licensed to multiple manufacturers, undermining our competitive advantage. Which failed because of your patent ownership, Eleanor said thoughtfully. An arrangement they never discovered in their due diligence. The realization of how close Solvix had come to destruction sobered everyone present. If my patents had been company property, nothing would have stopped Travis's plan. My termination would have been merely the first step in dismantling everything Harold Jenkins had built. We need to act decisively, Eleanor declared. Howard, initiate a shareholder rights plan immediately. Michelle, work with legal to identify and protect all remaining intellectual property. We'll convene again tomorrow to discuss next steps. After the meeting, Eleanor asked me to stay behind. You saved this company twice, she said quietly. First, by creating the technology that made us industry leaders, and now by exposing this takeover attempt before it succeeded. I shook my head. Your father saved the company when he recognized that people, not just products, deserved protection. That patent arrangement was his idea, not mine. He always said the same about you, Eleanor replied with a smile. That his best decision was protecting your innovations when everyone else said he was crazy. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We implemented aggressive defenses against the hostile takeover, including a poison pill provision that would dilute any attempt to gain controlling interest. Travis was dismissed for breach of fiduciary duty, with evidence of his collaboration with Vantage turned over to federal regulators. Most satisfying was rebuilding my innovation team. Jessica agreed to return as deputy director, bringing 2 other former team members with her. Together, we began conceptualizing a new generation of adaptive control systems that would make our existing technologies look primitive by comparison. 1 month after exposing the Vantage scheme, I received an invitation to meet with Harold Jenkins himself, now living in semi-retirement in Boulder. His health had declined, but his mind remained sharp as ever. I always knew they'd underestimate you, he said, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Quiet brilliance is invisible to people focused on short-term gains. I learned that from you, I replied. He leaned forward, eyes twinkling. Want to know the best part of this whole story? What's that? There's one more patent they never found, the most valuable one of all. Harold's revelation about an undiscovered patent sent me diving into historical records. What I found hidden in the original company filings was astonishing. A master patent for an adaptive learning framework that underpinned not just the HVX system, but potentially all future iterations of our technology. The patent had been filed under a separate holding company, Transcendent Engineering Solutions, with ownership split equally between Harold and me. It granted broad protection for the fundamental concepts behind our most successful products, extending decades beyond our other patents. He created a fail-safe, I explained to Eleanor after verifying the documents with Philip. If Solvix ever faced an existential threat, this patent could either save it or serve as leverage. And it's completely separate from your employment agreement, Eleanor noted. Even if they had discovered your other patents, this would have remained hidden. The timing couldn't have been better. Despite our defensive measures, Vantage Group had accumulated enough shares to demand board representation. Their designated member, Maxwell Reed, arrived at headquarters for his first official meeting with undisguised arrogance. I'm here to help streamline operations, he announced to the assembled executives. Solvix has tremendous potential that's been hampered by traditional thinking. Eleanor exchanged a glance with me before responding. We're always open to fresh perspectives, Mr. Reed. In fact, We have an exciting announcement today about our intellectual property portfolio. I stepped forward with the master patent documentation. This framework patent, which predates all our current products, has just been transferred back to Solvix's exclusive control in exchange for certain guarantees about our innovation division. Reed's expression shifted from confusion to shock as he scanned the documents, understanding their implications. The blood drained from his face. "This covers everything," he said hoarsely. "Yes," I agreed pleasantly. "Everything." The following month brought the complete unraveling of Vantage Group's takeover attempt. The master patent had effectively rendered their strategy obsolete. Without control of the fundamental technology, acquiring Solvix would only give them an empty shell. Their shares were quietly sold off at a significant loss. Maxwell Reed resigned from the board after just 2 meetings. Industry rumors suggested he had also been asked to leave Vantage. Sometimes failure carries its own severe consequences. With the external threat neutralized, we turned our focus inward. Jessica and I led a comprehensive review of Solvix's innovation pipeline, identifying gaps and opportunities. Our new team, a blend of veterans and fresh talent, began developing prototypes that would secure our market leadership for years to come. More personally satisfying was implementing a company-wide policy on intellectual property rights. Under the new system, engineers would receive direct ownership stakes in their innovations, with Solvix maintaining exclusive licensing. The model, dubbed the TRAN Protocol by Eleanor, became a case study in balancing corporate needs with individual recognition. Innovation thrives when creators have a personal stake in the outcome, I explained during the all-hands meeting announcing the changes. This isn't just about patents. It's about respect for the minds behind our success. Travis's replacement, a thoughtful woman named Vanessa Moore with both engineering and management experience, embraced the new approach wholeheartedly. Where Travis had seen only costs on a spreadsheet, Vanessa recognized the value of institutional knowledge and creative problem-solving. "I wish I could see Travis's face when he realizes what happened," Jessica commented during one of our planning sessions. "I don't," I replied honestly. This was never about revenge. It was about recognition of value, both the technology and the people who create it. Eleanor, overhearing this exchange, smiled appreciatively. "That's exactly why you belong in that director's chair, Michelle." The balance had finally been restored. The seeds of innovation I had planted over 22 years had grown into a forest that protected not just me, but everyone at Solvix who dared to create. Looking back on my journey from engineer to executive, I realized that true power had always resided in the quietest corners of the company, with those who built rather than those who boasted.